Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Drews from BIMTM, and I'm here today with Jared and Donnie. I hope they're up and down. I don't know. Um, and today we're here talking about BIM implementation and kind of where things go off the rails sometimes. So we have things broken into basically four phases of BIM implementation. We're going to kind of have our panel discussion around that, where phase one is we have a BIM requirement. Now what? Phase two would be, okay, so this BIM thing isn't going away. Now what do we do? Phase three is we need some standards and systems. And then phase four is how do we make this a competitive advantage for ourselves? So starting with phase one, this first question, I'm going to direct this one at Jared. So what happens when the field is left out of the BIM conversations early on?
Ooh, there are a number of things that happen, and specifically in my experience, when the field's left out of the BIM conversation early, is they get what they get, and the field team are experts in their specific trade. They know it inside and out. They know the code requirements. They know what works and what doesn't. And if their input is not a part of the conversation early, then you've got all these, sign off on first, second, third floor. And then when they get involved, they say, well, this isn't going to work because we can do this a lot more efficient if we would do X, Y, and Z. So let's make the change.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm going to pause you there for 1 second. I think it's particularly important in this first phase too, because this is the first time that the field team is exposed to BIM. So if they're left out of it, it's pretty easy for them to kind of point the picture or point the finger back at the BIM team and just say like,
very true.
this isn't working.
Right. And so then that makes the BIM team kind of feel, well, we we modeled it, we coordinated it, so why is it our fault that it's not right? So
Yeah,
the other thing as well is a lot of people in the BIM world, in the BIM department, they don't necessarily know construction or know the specific trade. Sure, you can learn stuff, by going through the code requirements or asking some people, but how somebody without that experience would model and coordinate those things is way different than what actually needs to happen in the field.
100%.
Yeah, I've never met a tradesperson that wants someone operating a computer to tell them where to install a pipe or a conduit.
Well, I think I have actually, but it's definitely the minority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
and if we flip that 180 degrees, would you have the BIM tech out in the field using a conduit vendor, for instance? No, because they don't know how to use it. So leverage, utilize the tools the way that they work best. And BIM is a tool. Field team knows that. So get their input, get their perspective, and that's going to make the coordination efforts go much more smoothly. Having buy-in from the field team is incredibly important because if they have ownership, they're ultimately responsible for what happens in the field.
yeah, 100%. Um, Donnie, have you seen GCs push BIM without really understanding what they're asking for?
Yeah, when a lot of times when GCs get started in BIM, they try and I'll use the term pawn it off onto the trade partners to lead that coordination process. Um, there's some pros and cons to that. I think it's a really approachable way to start seeing those advantages of BIM because you have relationships with those trade partners, you trust them, and they're there. They're already going to be participating in the project, so um, it's an easy relationship to develop. I think the challenge to that a lot of times is that the mechanical contractor that's leading that coordination has some stake in the game, right? Like they're
Mm-hmm.
they're going to guide that process to probably to whatever benefits them the most. The other piece is that, like, just to be blunt, mechanical contractor doesn't really care about like general construction practices. They don't
True.
care about how a wall is constructed or what priority interior wall framing is, and or how this soffit is going to be supported in the field, and they don't have that context to draw from because they're a mechanical contractor. Whereas if once it's all under the one roof, or you're using somebody that has the general contractor experience, um, you're able to utilize that knowledge set that's a lot more broad.
Sure.
Someone that understands those general construction practices, that knows how structures function, and can have those conversations with the design team, and then pass that information along to the MEPs during the coordination process.
So you're saying you think the biggest issue is that they aren't really owning the BIM coordination process. They're just kind of chucking it over the fence and hoping for the best.
Yeah, and I think sometimes some folks will see it just as a contract requirement if it's being pushed by the owner,
Hmm.
and it's just a box to check. And
Yeah.
so I think that's probably the worst case scenario for a project, because if the team leading it isn't committed to the success of that process, then everyone downstream struggles.
Right. But I think that's kind of where we're living in this phase one as a whole is like whether you're the general contractor or one of the MEP subs, you're there to check a box and that's it. Like you don't really care about anything else. In fact, you're probably looking at BIM as a burden to your job, not looking at any of the potential benefits that might come along with it. So
Right.
I'm gonna throw this one out there for either of you guys to pick up, but what's the most common mistake MEP subcontractors make when they first start into coordination?
I can take a part of that and get that started. So one of the most common mistakes that I've come across is, oh crap, we've got to do BIM. Field guy, you're doing BIM now. That's all
Okay.
well and good, but they understand the field. But then they get into this environment, not knowing the software, not knowing the BIM execution plan, not knowing how it all ties together, not knowing how it can benefit the
Hmm.
project, the company, the downstream effects of that. Then you've got people who are spinning their wheels, spending a week doing something that doesn't have to take that long, maybe a day, maybe 10 hours, and because they don't know what they don't know, there
Sure. No
there's a
fault of
lot
their
of
own,
extra
right?
waste, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big waste. I think that's the big term there. They're probably over modeling early on without all the information. I've even seen some subcontractors modeling architectural walls and things like that because they don't even know how to link models in properly, or
Right.
they're just doing some really wacky practices because they're doing their best, but they
Hmm.
didn't have somebody really show them how this stuff
Right.
works.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see from the trade partners that are just starting to get into this is that it's an isolated workflow. They're
Hmm.
the BIM team isn't talking to the project manager, who isn't talking to the field, and the issues that we're trying to solve in the BIM through the BIM process are stuck in the BIM process, and then they don't make it to the field, and those issues are just realized all over again. Or uh, we solve them incorrectly, to Jared's point from earlier, where um, you have to model it like you build it, right?
Yeah,
If you're not modeling it like you build it, then um, to be
it's a
blunt,
disservice.
what's the point?
Right, exactly.
What's the point?
This isn't just an exercise to model things, just to model them,
Right.
Right.
even though that's what some people think sometimes.
Hmm.
Okay, so phase one, we had a BIM requirement. the MEP trades are getting into it. They're checking a box. So phase two typically looks like, all right, well, BIM isn't going away. We're seeing it on our jobs more and more. We better get used to this, and we better start figuring out maybe the right term is investing some more resources into this. So I guess my question would be for Jared, where do smaller subs usually go wrong when trying to build out their own BIM teams then?
That's a great question. So a lot of smaller subs go wrong when trying to build out their BIM team is partly what we covered a little earlier, just bringing somebody in from the field. So they don't know BIM, they don't understand BIM. Some of the other ways that this can go wrong as well is hiring somebody who knows the software inside and out, can make amazing families, can coordinate the crap out of anything. But if they don't understand the trade and the specs and all of the stuff that goes into that, then you're modeling a bunch of stuff, A, that isn't needed, B, isn't important, or C, even worse, it's wrong. And also getting into the requirement once again. Okay, if you can model, but you can't coordinate, or they're obstinate and no, we have to be here and we're not moving. And it's a collaborative effort. So sometimes you need to shift because you can, even if you don't want to. Other times you can't shift, and being able to communicate that to the other trades for their understanding and knowledge, then you start building that rapport and you can start having that true collaboration and really make the project shine. And that, once again, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're trying to jump in without leveraging somebody else's experience or a company to help guide you, you'll make a lot of mistakes that could have been prevented.
Well, so I'm gonna challenge you with this one because I think what you just said was basically the same thing you said in phase one, where maybe proper guidance or maybe not having the right experience is the biggest challenge. But how does that vary from phase one to phase two? Is it more about just not like continually not understanding what like how to get your team educated properly, or is it more like is it something else, I guess?
Well, certainly that has a part of it. Some of the other things that could go wrong would be offloading the project to
Like outsource?
an outsourced firm.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of still ties into phase one, but okay, it's not going away, so we have to do it. So let's just push it off to somebody else to make it happen.
I'm gonna read in between the lines here a little bit. So what I'm getting from this phase one to phase two is like, so we're understanding that it isn't going away. However, maybe we're still not fully bought into it yet. And I'm gonna redirect that to a question to Donnie. And do you think the training gap issue or like not buying into BIM is more of a leadership problem, like executive type leadership, or like where do you see that coming from, I guess?
Yeah. I'll kind of rephrase it a little bit different and say that how important how leadership buy-in can completely transform implementing BIM within a company, and that comes from understanding what the operational goals are within the company of implementing this tool and process, because implementing a tool like BIM can change your entire operations from estimating all the way through project execution and turnover. And without that vision, people are kind of stabbing in the dark on how to get from point A to point B. With that vision from company leadership, it allows operations to be aligned in what that next goal is. are we are we trying to prefabricate? If so, what are we trying to prefabricate? Are we are we just claiming space for our field team to do what they do best, and that's build in the field? Which is fine. There's nothing
And
wrong with any of these goals, but leadership needs to understand and convey those goals to to operations as a whole, not just the BIM team, not just project management, not just the field, but integrating those with a cohesive vision.
and those goals could potentially vary per project too. And I think that's where um, some of the early hiccups happen too. Is like we start doing BIM a certain way, and it's like that's how we do it on every job. And it's
Right.
like, well, does it make sense? Like, are we going to prefab in this existing building where there's crap everywhere? Like, it's more challenging.
Right.
If you're in a new building, you're probably going to try to prefab everything you can, if that's your company goals, I should say.
Right. And kind of going back to Jared's point, there's some growing pains in this process, right? Like there's it takes a bit of humility to admit that like we don't know how to utilize this technology to realize the operational goals that we want
Yeah.
to realize. And so um, it it setting your ego aside and allowing yourself to seek consult from people that have been through this,
Hmm.
and in order to get that data that's cohesive through this entire process is wise. We've seen
100%.
it over and over where on the opposite side where there's that there people are we're in construction, so people are a little are proud and
Yeah.
want to figure it out themselves. And it's gotten this industry a long ways, but there's a lot of pain that can be avoided by seeking out the wisdom from others.
And I'll add to that that they probably will figure it out eventually, but at what cost?
Right.
And I think this phase two for me, I think is about making those small wins and starting to show people that there is value in this and starting to build buy-in.
Yeah.
But if you're messing things up in this phase two and creating questions in the field's minds and creating questions in leadership minds,
Right.
you're almost doing yourself a disservice at this point. You're proving to leadership that BIM is just a cost and there's no benefits to it, and it's really hard to turn that ship around once
It really is.
once the team starts believing that.
Yeah.
And I think like the other thing between this phase one and sometimes what helps get a company from phase one to phase two here, and it is these internal champions,
Hmm.
and that allow that are selling this technology, that are selling this process, and casting that vision internally. And that's a role that I've played in previous companies, and from when I first entered the industry, and being able to see what these technologies can do for us, and how they can save us time, and help create a successful plan, and then communicating that to people in an understanding way and solving their problems. Like I think that's understanding other people's problems internally and showing how these technologies can solve them is critical to help prod this along. And sometimes those people, um, they're not always the powerful people in the company. Sometimes
Right.
they're the people that are just getting into the industry, but they have this vision that can help everyone.
I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said like make sure what we're trying to do is solve problems, not BIM shouldn't be creating problems. Like BIM shouldn't be
Simple things be simple, right?
yeah,
Like
exactly.
we're not trying to like we're not trying to show people how to hammer a nail. Everyone
Right.
everyone knows
Well,
how to do that. But we can let us help you with these complex issues and these date and like streamlined data silos and how how do we how do we coordinate these complex MEP systems, right? Like those, that's a challenge. That's and understanding those challenges intricately from the people that are facing them day in, day out,
Mhm.
and solving those problems is that's what's going to get it moving forward for sure.
well, the other thing I was going to mention with that too, though, is like, don't create problems. Meaning, if it's easy to get your takeoff off of your PDFs right now to figure out how many devices there are, do it in your PDFs.
Yeah.
Don't
Mhm.
don't spend 1,000 hours populating them in your model just to pull some quantities out that nobody's going to ever use. Like,
Right.
do solve problems. Do what makes sense. Don't just do it because that's BIM.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
use your
Well,
head.
and what you guys were talking about here had me think of some other stuff as well. So the smaller subs going wrong, they don't utilize it for their benefit. We talked about it in phase one. It just checks the box. What about quantity takeoff? What about helping with estimates? What about design review, pre-planning, prefab, as Donnie had mentioned, but sharing the information and the knowledge to the field so they can start pre-planning that build. Oh,
Mm,
who needs to go in first? Oh, ductwork, pitch pipe, whomever, you can start utilizing that model to that benefit for that pre-plan before you start installing, and also identify some constraints before you get there to come up with solutions before you've got six foremen going, well, you move, no, you move, well, I can't move. And it's that pre-plan and that kind of how to make it come together
yeah.
intelligently.
Show them the benefits in this phase so that they can start getting some buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make them come to you. Provide it to them. Like, hey, did you know I could get you light fixture counts? Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So moving out of phase two to phase three, I think this is theoretically at this point we have some buy-in where like clearly jobs aren't going away. We're hiring more people, and I think this is where we start understanding we're getting buy-in from other departments. We have goals for prefab. We have goals for quantity takeoff. How do we start building systems around BIM that are like multidisciplinary or multi-departmental, I should say? So I guess my question goes to Donnie for this one. What happens when companies try to build standards too early?
I think they're going back to the conversation earlier about how important leadership is. There's
Hmm.
and building those standards and systems too early or in a silo has potential for people to not be aligned on
Hmm.
what the end goal is. So if the BIM team is going to the nth degree trying to create prefabrication drawings for every conduit rack in the building, but they don't have the prefab shop to do that.
Right.
What are we doing here, right?
Or the field
Um,
has no intention of utilizing the model or something like that, right?
exactly. Yeah. Um, so I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay. Jared, in this phase, like creating those Revit templates and the Revit families is a big part of the process, making sure everything kind of like works together, or buying some kind of platform that does it for you. Have you ever seen, I'll call it great templates and content really fall flat?
Yes, I have seen great content and templates fall flat. A couple instances where because you've used it on one project doesn't mean that's going to work for another. So you've got, let's say, a Revit template that has every family you've ever used on every project. Well, now all of a sudden you've got a lot of extra bloat. So you're starting off a brand new file, and let's say you're at 300 megs. Well, now all that information needs to load every time you open. It needs to save every time you sync. And you don't think that that would really be all that much time, but you compound that by how many team members you have, how many times they're doing it. Well, then now all of a sudden in a month, you've wasted 50 hours,
Sure.
maybe more, maybe less. So being able to have a great template is keep it lean with the 80% of stuff you use all of the time, and then bring in what you need only when you need it. That's going to streamline your processes from start to finish, so that you're not having this extra waste of time and model components and hardware fails and those types of things.
And the other thing I'll say to add to that is your content and your templates are only as good as the process and documentation that there is to back it up. So you could spend all the time in the world and your BIM manager could know that this thing works like a top. But if nobody knows which buttons to click or how to get there, like it's all for nothing kind of thing. So make sure your team's trained right and you have the documentation to back it up.
Right.
I think another thing along there is that the industry as a whole has learned in the last decade of doing this thing is that more isn't always better.
Yeah.
There was a period of time when manufacturers provided families for their equipment, for example, and it was detailed out the wazoo, right? It had every widget, it had every nut and every bolt, and to Jared's point, that just bogged down models. It made the BIM process clunky and inefficient, and it provided too much information. So we, as an industry, we've kind of stepped back from that approach a little bit and just provided dimensionally accurate general shapes, like in a lot of cases.
Sure.
And adding information on an as needed basis, like clearance zones or connection points for rooftop units or what have you. So I think it's important, again, it's important to understand what the goals are when you're creating your content. Is your goal to provide this this LOD 5000 light fixture, or is your goal to coordinate the light fixture in the clearance zone that's needed to pop it out of a ceiling tile?
Mm-hmm.
One question that we didn't really talk about for pre-prep for this conversation, I guess we'll call it. So this phase is more about how we get BIM to spread out to like different departments. So this kind of just came to me, but like, what do we do in this phase specifically to make sure that we're getting buy-in from all departments and we're not like, BIM's not just doing something and shoving it down prefab's throat or the field's throat or something like that. How are we creating this collaborative environment where we can get feedback from everywhere to create our processes to feed each other?
Well, one way that I've been involved that's been successful is, similar to step or phase two, getting the field involved early, but that's also getting prefab involved early, getting the PM involved early, being able to talk about the plan, the benefits of what we're trying to accomplish here. Because prefab really only works when it's tailored to the needs of the project. If you're prefabbing everything down to every nut and bolt, that's a lot of time from a lot of different people. And the field already knows how to do this because that's what they're experts in. So let's take kind of a manufacturing approach to it. What's the 80% of stuff that we can reduce field time and be able to provide them, say, kits or parts and pieces that are the same, that they can take part A and it can go anywhere in this run where a part A is needed. It doesn't have to be this hangar specifically is 1952. It can be hangar A.
So I'm going to challenge you on that one a little bit too, because I think that's where BIM teams can go wrong too, is like, yes, let's get the PM involved, let's get the field involved. Absolutely, we should do that. However, every PM and every guy in the field has a different opinion about what material they should be using or how things should get run. And I think where you really start to see your BIM team and your prefab successful is when you start standardizing some of the material you're using and some of the way the prefab is getting put out. Otherwise, it's all 100% custom, and we're not really building repeatable processes, and we're not building like that muscle memory. We're trying to reinvent the wheel on every single job. So how do we start making that happen?
Yeah, I heard this saying a little while back. Communication is contractual, collaboration is cultural. And so what I mean by that is that to build those systems across departments within an organization, it takes collaboration. And the only if you're trying to do that alone, you're going to be that alone salmon swimming upstream, right?
Yeah.
But if you're if there's a culture that backs up that collaborative spirit, then I don't know how this fits in the metaphor, but it's going to be a lot less lonely of a process and more you'll be like a gaggle of salmon.
I think they call that a school.
There you go. That's
I think I get what you're saying though. So like let's get a couple project managers together. Let's get a couple field guys together. Maybe almost creating like a committee
Sure.
where you can decide on like maybe not standardizing all material, but like the basics of material so that your BIM team they can just when they're on a job they go. They know what to do. They don't have to stop on every little freaking junction box they want to put in the model and have to like ask, well, what are we doing on this job? Because it significantly slows things down. All right, so phase 4. So we're building out systems that are multi-departmental. Now BIM becomes a competitive advantage for your company. What's the big differentiation between phase 3 and phase 4 here? And Donnie, this one's going to come back to you again. What's the role of leadership making BIM stick and having it as a competitive advantage?
Yeah, I think there's to utilize BIM as a competitive advantage, you're doing it whether it's a contract requirement or not. You're doing it regardless of what type of project you're on, whether it's a mid-rise multifamily wood structure or a complex hospital build-out, right? There's different workflows and processes that support both of those project types, and your company has realized that and used it to increase productivity in the field and to get more work and beat out competition.
So like proactively when you're putting your bids out there or you're sitting in your interviews, like BIM becomes just a regular part of the conversation, not like, hey, do you guys have a BIM team? Yeah, we outsource it to this other. Like, no, it's integral. It's a part of it's a big part of this organization, and it flows through every department.
Right, and it's discussed early and often, right? During
100%.
When you're creating your estimate, you're thinking about what can be prefabricated and how it can be prefabricated, and making sure that all of those different costs and are covered within that approach, and using that again as a competitive advantage.
Jared, you mentioned in previous phases, like making sure that we get the project managers or the field guys involved early on in the job, but what finally gets field teams to buy into the BIM process? And how do you earn that trust to really make it that BIM competitive advantage?
Well, there's a number of things that are an important part of it. I'm going to start with it's just time with them, learning from them,
Mm.
leveraging their knowledge and experience. One of the things that I specifically dealt with on my very first electrical coordination project is I'm not an electrician. I don't I don't know how all this stuff comes together, what's important, what isn't important, specifically from an installation perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked my manager at the time, I said, "Hey, I think it would be really important did my if I spent 2 to 3 days a week in the trailer." Now I know that's not realistic for every team member for every project, but at the time it worked out, and my manager said, "Yes, that's a great idea." So I was sitting right next to the foreman and modeling and coordinating and asking questions and just letting him just that constant reminder, I'm not an electrician. How can you share your knowledge with me to make this better for coordination, for prefab, for you? And being able to listen to them and actually implement the stuff that they were teaching me and showing me and reviewing it with them on a consistent basis really, really helped that project grow. It helped me grow. It helped the foreman grow. It helped him understand BIM, how it can play a positive role in his projects, how we can utilize that for prefabrication. And then in a similar way, it wasn't as much with the PM, but because of that connection that I was developing with the GF, he was able to relay that information to the PM and say, hey, this is a big benefit for these reasons. So yes, there's an upfront cost, but we can really see how this is going to help us downstream. And for me, that really helped because then now I'm understanding their language, they're understanding mine, and then I was able to take that experience with me to other foremen, other projects, other PMs, and help them identify the benefit that we're able to provide from a BIM coordination prefab perspective.
I think what you're saying is true, but I think we're missing on some of the points. Like, I think the collaboration is great. I think where you really start to get the buy-in is where you, the guy sitting in the trailer, start identifying issues for the field, and they're like, "Oh shit, I didn't even think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we better get that figured out." Or like, "Hey, the material just came out. The prefab material just came out to the job site. Crap, things aren't working out the way we thought they were going to. Jared, can you redesign this little area real quick? We need to get in there next week and get this installed." So when it starts becoming a proactive tool that they can utilize for their benefit, I think that's where you really start to see the field buy-in and not
Mm-hmm.
just BIM being shoved down their throat. Like
Mm-hmm.
they start to trust Jared, they start to call him for things, they start to
Mm-hmm.
like the light fixtures. Like shit, I should have ordered these last week, Jared. How many are in this area? Oh, there's 20, 25. Okay, cool. I can get those. We'll get the rest
Yeah,
later. Like,
right.
I think that's when you know you've made it to this stage is when the field team comes asking you questions as a BIM
100%.
guy. Um, and I think I just want to emphasize something that Jared was talking about in his how he went out into the field, and I want to use this word again, humility. And
Mm-hmm.
it takes when you're implementing this stuff, it takes humility to go out there and say, what do you guys care about? What 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 problems need to be solved?
Yeah.
Oh, you have problems X, Y, and Z. Here's how I can solve that with technology, right? And I think,
What if you can't go out to the field? Like if your BIM team's remote, like how do you do that?
a relationships are critical, right?
Yeah.
And so whether that relationship is being made at sitting next to them in a trailer, or if that relationship is a virtual one, and you're FaceTiming with them as they're on site looking at something in the
Holding
field.
their phone like,
Yeah.
can you see this?
I mean, it's all about the relationship. Once
Yeah,
you've developed that relationship and there's that trust there, then you I think that goes a very long way.
I think that's the piece I was
Admittedly,
trying to.
it
Oh,
is
sorry, go
more
ahead.
it is more challenging um, as a remote employee trying to collaborate with someone in the field that may or may not know how to FaceTime. Um, but I think there are strategies, there are ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the point I was trying to get at with that is like going into the trailer is great and it's easy. Like I'm sitting in there. They can come and yell at me whenever they want, and we can go walk out and look at the problem. Um, when we're out of sight, out of mind, it's easier to blame the guy who isn't there.
Right.
So us as the BIM team needs to check in more regularly and like really try to understand how things are going instead of them just being like, yeah, things are fine. Like start asking specific questions. Like, how did the install go for this? Like, did you use this material? And then they're like, no, actually that sucked. Like, we need to change that on the next one. So like, we have to
Mhm.
get really curious when we're remote.
Mhm. Yeah.
For sure.
And one of the other things that for me and just my curiosity is, okay, I'm looking at these electrical drawings. What does all of this mean? One line specifically. I've got all of these numbers and all of these code. What does this actually mean? Oh, well, it's this size, this many quantity. And then I would start asking the questions. Hey, in the detail, I saw this, and this doesn't match what's in the one line. What is the truth here? What are we actually doing? And Jeff, to your point, oh shit, I didn't see that. I that is something that I missed. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. That's one of the small trust builders, the relationship builder, because me as a non-electrician, I'm looking at things and trying to understand why. And so things that they just look at and I'm going to say assume because they've been through this before, they didn't catch that detail three was really important for the one line, which now affects the underground, and then now what material you're procuring.
I think the other piece that I can add to that too is like the accountability piece. And I say, I think I think when BIM or when the field understands their role in BIM, like providing information to the BIM team, reviewing drawings, instead of just chucking things over the fence, I think that's really when it becomes the competitive advantage. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're using it as a tool. Yeah. All right. So we got through all four phases. I'm gonna ask both of you to kind of just leave me with like, what do you think the biggest takeaway from this is? If you had to give like one final thought, I guess. Jared, will start with you.
Oh man. Well, I would say that the most important things, at least in my experience, is developing a relationship, developing knowledge, understanding processes, procedures, being able to identify and fill those gaps, but then also understanding and realizing just because it might be a requirement doesn't mean that it is actually going to benefit the project. Don't don't do everything for the sake of doing everything. Take a step back, look at the from the beginning, and identify what's going to really enhance the project and the process and the BIM experience, and what can we fulfill but not go to the gnats behind on details wise. Because if it's not going to benefit, it's just a waste of time and money.
Yep, it's a good one. Donnie, how about you?
My 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 last comment is going to be don't go through it alone. There's so much. There's so many winding roads and different forks that you can go down, and so find someone that you trust and seek counsel that's gone through this before, whether that's an industry friend or a third party implementer um, or just your friendly neighborhood BIM guy. I mean, just um, make just yeah, seek trusted, wise counsel as you're working through this, and don't let yourself struggle alone. And as you're working through that, find small wins and celebrate those small wins. It's a hard journey,
It
and
is.
so just be cognizant of those wins and um, really be intentional about celebrating them.
I think for me, my final takeaway is BIM isn't just about software. It's about people and
Mm.
processes, and it isn't always a straight line. So if things feel like they're starting to go off the rails, it's okay to take a step back and make sure that you're doing things right, because sometimes a step back means a step forward.
Mhm.
Where if you just keep powering through, it might be a way bigger problem.
Mhm.
Um, so that's it. Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Donnie. I
Thanks,
appreciate the
Jeff.
time, and I hope we do more of these in the future.
Me too. This is fun. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. See you guys.
All right. See ya.